Chapter 3: How to Develop Competency. The recommended practices around building of competency are the most applied and action-oriented of this handbook. On an individual basis, and for many organizations, the building of competency is a worthy result to pursue in and of itself. High-functioning teams need to build a high level of mutual respect and a connectedness with each other and their leaders. Essentially, one of the things that is happening in the application presented below is that people within the organization are constantly being recruited into the continuous improvement of themselves and the organization. This is a call to venture into what was previously unknown to you, to seek the treasure of knowledge and wisdom. 3.1: Personal leadership habits and tactics. At the leader's personal level, there are a number of tactics and habits that can be very effective to help create positive energy and avert crises. Stephen R. Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is a must-read, cover to cover. Briefly summarizing the 7 habits: be proactive. Begin with the end in mind. Put first things first. Think win-win. Seek to understand, then to be understood. Synergize. Sharpen the saw. All of these habits will echo in the practical guidance below, and one of the most powerful ideas is what Covey calls the time management matrix. I would rather call this the prioritization matrix, as it helps to prioritize things. It is often misunderstood, and we will briefly examine the most common trap people fall into. The matrix is shown in the figure below, figure 5, Covey's time management matrix. The trap is to spend most of your time in quadrant 1. This is not only a path to mental exhaustion, which results in the remaining time available going to quadrant 4 due to exhaustion. This is not only a path to mental exhaustion, which results in the remaining time available going to quadrant 4 due to exhaustion, but also a path to a positive feedback loop where more and more crises are created due to a lack of long-range planning and prevention. An effective leader will spend a lot of time in quadrant 2. In any organization, there will be crises, and a leader will need to help in dealing with them. A great leader in a great organization will have minimized the number of crises by virtue of the leadership spending enough time in quadrant 2 activities. Again, 7 Habits is a must-read, and Covey's full exploration of this topic should be considered mandatory reading. 3.1.1: Lead by example. Of all habits and tactics, leading by example is the most important and probably the hardest, hence it is being addressed a second time. The earlier context discussed exemplifying values. Here, the focus will be on more applied aspects. As leaders, we are constantly being watched and judged whether worthy by the people we are trying to lead. Everyone hates a hypocrite. If you're going to make rules, you need to live by them. If leaders create rules that then result in people breaking them, even just once, because that rule is impossible to follow or so hard to follow that it is likely people won't, then the entire structure of rules comes into question. If this rule doesn't need to be followed, then why should that one or that one? Chaos ensues, and even worse, corruption may follow. Follow the rules, policies, procedures, etc. starts with you. A tricky part of leading by example is when to lead from the front and share hardship. There are many times, especially when bringing younger staff up to speed, especially future leaders, that being out front is really valuable. The less experienced staff get to see a pro in action, role modeling how things should get done. They see a leader that is not afraid to get into the trenches and get dirty. There are a couple of dangers here, though. 1, ego. 2, martyrdom. It can be tempting to lead from the front, to almost show off to the people around you that you've still got it. This is the wrong reason for doing it. The right reason is that there really is no one else to do it, and it needs to get done. Even then, there is an opportunity to be a teacher. As Willink discusses extensively in his podcast and books, ego-driven leadership is not good leadership. Check your ego. When your people are ready to kick off the training wheels, do so. There is an interesting spectrum of your level of involvement where at one end you lead from the front and are intimately involved, and at the other end you largely absent yourself, as discussed in the next section. It takes some experience and leadership judgment to know where in this spectrum you should operate in any given situation. Excessively leading from the front can also be one of the paths to burnout. In a growing business, if you are always at the front, you risk becoming overscheduled and overworked, leading to burnout. Don't be a martyr. Even though people might love you for it, after all, you're reducing their workload. However, you might end up doing the work for your protege rather than working alongside them and providing guidance, robbing them of an opportunity for growth. This could actually result in the protege building up resentment. This temptation can be hard to resist, especially in the engineering world where fun is to be had doing the engineering work. Another ego-related trap and the opposite of humility is hubris, excessive pride and overconfidence, often in combination with arrogance. This is a trap the leader must avoid, and the simple way is to ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? Every leader should also know about the heuristic known as Chesterton's fence, named after G.K. Chesterton. Briefly, it means to not do away with something that is existing, like a fence in a particular location, until you know why it was put there in the first place and what other downstream effects there were from it having been put there. The rest of this personal habits section should be looked at as part of leading by example. These are all tactics and habits that as a leader you need to put into practice, master, and teach others to do. 3.1.1.1 Self-care. Leadership can be dreadfully lonely, and there is a need for self-care beyond just physical need for exercise and proper nutrition. Having some peers from outside the organization, maybe a friend from school that has attained a similar level of leadership, that you can chew over things you are struggling with, can be really helpful. Organizations like the Executive Committee, TEC, in Canada and Vistage in the United States provide this service and can be very helpful. I spent about 2 years with TEC and found them to be very helpful from a self-care perspective. I was able to get a critique of some of my ideas for organizational change, exposure to other people's ideas, and the realization that the struggles and doubts and sleepless nights I had were not personal failings, but universals that all leaders have from time to time. This realization made it easier to carry on. Some leadership is just putting one foot in front of the other when things look bleak. When I took over as president in 2012, the loneliness that came with the change was dreadful. The gradual departure of other firm founders and parallel growth of the firm in the ensuing 8 years only exacerbated the loneliness. As new people join the firm, they start to see you by the job title, which makes it harder to connect with people in general. Once our company was large enough, I was able to live out a fantasy I'd had for a while, to have a company sports team of some sort and have some fun together. There's a great charity in Milton, Ontario, the Leslie Wells Slow Pitch Lions Club softball tournament. In between the Saturday games, I invited people to my house and barbecued and played in some of the games with the teams as well. However, as the company gets larger, be conscious of the best use of your time. For me, the cooking was a good use of time in being grounded and literally serving my team, and I actually enjoy cooking. This gave me energy and helped me keep grounded. But don't get carried away as your level of leadership grows and your time becomes more valuable. Be selective about these types of overt displays. Being a part of this event helped me to become more connected with people from all levels in the organization. A dangerous trap for leaders, and part of what can help propel them into leadership, is the willingness to make sacrifices to get things done. Is this truly sustainable? What is it that is getting sacrificed? What impact is that going to have on you in the long run? Is working on holiday weekends to get shutdowns done the kind of sacrifice I'm talking about? Not really. It is the more insidious sacrifices that happen week after week, can become habitual, stack up, and creep up on you. Things like the sacrifice of hobbies or interests outside of work, sleep, exercise, date night with your spouse, family vacations, energy needed to do any of the above. If you are consistently so wiped out that you don't have any energy left to do the above, there's something really wrong. One of the aspects of self-care is to be able to create and respect some boundaries for yourself. If you don't do this, how are you going to respect other people's boundaries? If you feel like you cannot handle the workload and you need to consistently sacrifice things from the above list, there are some important questions you need to ask yourself. Am I in the right job? Is the level of complexity of this job too much for me to handle? Is the sacrifice a way that I am compensating for a lack of ability? Am I afraid of a loss in status or income? Should I simplify my life so that I don't need as much income? Is the job itself one that no one can handle and I should be going to a new job? Am I micromanaging? Am I delegating effectively? The human centered approach to servant leadership has to start with you taking care of yourself. Just like on an airplane, pre boarding instructions, put your mask on first, then help others. If you aren't taking care of yourself, you will not be able to help others, and the lack of self care will be contagious, spreading your burnout to others in the organization and in your family. 3.1.1.2 Project Execution and Workload Management. Project execution is a form of transformation, and it is good to reflect on this quote from Leading Change by Cotter, 2012, in reference to leading organizational change. Transformation requires sacrifice, dedication, and creativity, none of which usually comes with coercion. Efforts to effect change that are overmanaged and under-led also tend to eliminate the inherent messiness of transformations. Caution is advised on the first part of this quote regarding sacrifice. We must balance this notion of sacrifice with the needs of self-care, ensuring that the sacrifices made are not chronic in nature, leading to an unsustainable effort. This is certainly not to say that projects don't require disciplined management. They do, as Cotter makes so clear with respect to organizational change in the latter parts of Leading Change. What I have observed in the last decade is more and more management in projects and less real leadership. A truly effective project manager is also a leader, and for the transformation inherent in project execution, both management and leadership are required. Project managers are a cadre of future leaders that need to be cultivated and closely watched. A key aspect of good management is workload planning. Excessive workload is obviously a major contributing factor to burnout and the most obvious first thing to address. Putting effort into successfully managing workload effectively communicates to your team that you care about them. I loathe when I hear a manager talking about needing more resources when what they mean is people. Talking about people as resources is dehumanizing, disrespectful, and contagious. Before you know it, this mindset permeates the organization. This is part of why I have a level of hostility for the department name Human Resources. I find it ironically dehumanizing to treat human beings as simple resources. We resisted having any title in the organization referring to human resources as long as possible, preferring to split the traditional HR functions across multiple roles: administrative, recruitment, talent development. We went with a more grounded approach to directly address what matters to the organization and foundationally important people-related matters. Leading a team of teams with shared personnel is a challenging dance and requires a lot of coordination and communication between team leaders. For a long time, I owned and coordinated this process, and when the time came, was able to delegate this to other senior managers. There is a temptation and even a natural gravity for this process to let the transactional aspects become fully dominant. This cannot be allowed to happen. This process of workload management has a large relational aspect to it. The leader running this process has the opportunity to get feedback from team leaders to find out where there's friction in the organization, who the high performers are that leaders compete for, which team leaders have higher leadership potential. You get to watch them in action. In formalized workload management systems with shared personnel, there will also be an almost irresistible temptation for managers to overschedule people so that they guarantee availability for that manager's bidding. This is unfair to the organization as it erodes productivity. It is unfair to the individual being scheduled, as they will now be more likely to have idle time twiddling their thumbs. And lastly, it is unfair to other project leaders who may be in need of help on their projects. Nothing good comes from this phenomena, and it needs to be fought by challenging project managers on their projected workloads. Another tendency of workload projection is for the actual aggregate workload to be less than what was projected. At least this was the case for us. Usually there would be some kind of a project delay somewhere, and this would reduce workload. The solution for us was to deliberately, but not too much, schedule a bit of overtime so that we would land at the right workload. Does this always work perfectly? No.